We got a major trade problem on our hands. We just talked about it briefly today, and this is one area where I think we have a substantial disagreement. I mean, you tend to play it down. I think that's a serious analytical mistake because I think it's adding to our problems. I want to just show you one chart and make the point and ask for your reaction to it. Last year we had a trade deficit with Japan of $42 billion. $42 billion in their favor, that in effect left the United States, the jobs associated with it, a little bit of it came back, very small amount came back. If you look at what the trade deficit has been with Japan since 1980, year by year, all of these are deficits in their favor. Starting in 1980, $12 billion. By 1984, that had tripled to $36 billion. By 86, it's up to 58, nearly $59 billion. Last year, $42 billion. Since 1980, a total of $460 billion. Nearly $500 billion to their favor. We don't have a trading pattern like that, by the way, with any other nation except Japan, and I would assert that's because of the predatory closed market trading practices that they use. Now, some of the people who say that we needn't worry about this make a point that they say, well, it doesn't matter whether the United States is producing computer chips or potato chips or wood chips. In fact, some of the sort of the trust fund ideologues in the administration peddle that view all the time. Seems to me I've just heard you make a contrary argument. You want a high income? Then you'd better be in a sophisticated skill area producing a high value added product. And if that means computer chips or its equivalent in terms of a high value added product that is more valuable to an individual worker or to a community or to a country than producing wood chips or potato chips or some other kind of low value added, less sophisticated, something that requires less education, is much more apt to be up against a massive world competitive pressure than something that is more sophisticated, that involves a much higher level of effort. We've got a terrible problem in that area, and I don't know how we change the mindset of some of the people who are in key policy positions today who assert that it really doesn't matter, that we can drain capital out of this country, we can let whole industries move out of this country, particularly higher technology industries. Now, we've lost to Japan already, starting with the consumer product items like televisions and VCRs and so forth, but it's moved over to machine tools. It's certainly very heavily into the automobile areas today. It's moving now into biotechnology activity, and they've targeted aviation and even space activity for the future. Just announced that we're going to lay about 5,000 people off in NASA, which has, of course, been one of our sort of crown jewels of technological achievement here in the United States. I mean, doesn't this bear on our economic situation? Isn't this part of our weakness? Can we drain this kind of capital out of our system? If you look at what our long-term deficit is, it isn't just Japan. Japan is by far the worst case. But if you look at what's happened during the 1980s, it hasn't just been the over-leveraging and the damage to the balance sheets. Look at the international balance sheet. We went from being a creditor nation as recently as the mid-80s, where we were a creditor nation, all the way back to 1917. We crossed this debtor nation line in about the mid-80s, and this is what's been happening since. It's going on now. It's going on. We don't have a strategy, by the way, a real strategy to deal with this. One of the things that bothers me about the discussion today is, you know, you're very sensitive about not wanting to have a fiscal stimulus package on the side. It's awfully hard to have much of a strategic plan for America to change these trend lines if we don't have a plan and if we don't make a much larger effort to invest in ourselves. Now, you make the point that you want to do some changing in the tax laws to get more in the direction of investment, and I appreciated the fact that you made that point, and on that point I would agree. But if we're just talking about token measures on the margin, do you honestly believe that that's going to change this trend line?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think We're looking at this in probably two different sides of the balance sheet, if I may put it that way. In effect, what those data also suggest is that foreigners are putting their savings in the United States and investing. And indeed, the current account deficit, which is the obverse of what you point out there, is one of the means which enabled us, even though we had very low private savings and a significant drain on those savings from our federal deficit, to maintain at least a modicum of private domestic capital investment.
That's right, but we borrowed most of that money from them.
Indeed,
they have lent us back money that used to be ours. So yes, they've lent us the money, we're paying interest on the money, and in the end, we've got to give them back the money, don't we?
Eventually, we have to return it, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like the process of the very significant continuous current account deficits, as I know you don't like either. The question basically is, what do we do with it?
Do you think a leading power, the world's most advanced industrial country, should function in the international arena as a debtor nation?
I think not, Senator.
See, that's our problem, and we have no strategy to fix that.
Well, I'm not at all. I'm not sure that we differ with respect to the goals. I think what we're probably differing with, and as I hear you, I do differ with you, with respect to the particular tactics of getting us there. And I should think, as I argued before, both the budget and the banking committees in years past, that a crucial element involved in restoring our balance is going to have to be to curtail the drain of our budget deficits on private savings and find ways in which domestic private savings creation can get enhanced. If we can do that, the arithmetic of the system will gradually reduce our current account deficit.
Well, let me ask you this. As an economist and as somebody that's deeply concerned about the future of this country, can we afford to let any other single country, and most particularly Japan, who's a major competitor of ours in the international arena, drain net another $460 billion out of this country over the next 12 years in the trade area?
Well,
I mean, is that sensible economic strategy?
Well, I think the reason we disagree is I wouldn't characterize it as draining capital. What I would characterize it basically as that we are purchasing, and I must say consuming, perhaps an inordinately large amount from abroad, and that is what's creating our deficit, and that cannot go on indefinitely. The key question is, how do we adjust that in a manner without creating the protectionist type of activities which will undercut the competitive...
Why has protectionism worked for Japan?
Well,
you know they practice it. You've been over there. You know what the system is like. Protectionism is the name of the game in Japan. It's worked like a charm. Why is it that it works for them, and you're here to say it's such a bad idea?
I'm not sure that it does work.
Well, it worked to the tune of $460 billion in their favor since 1980 just with the United States.
Well, let me say this, Senator.
I got people all over my state that are unemployed as a result of this.
Oh, I have no question that it has.
It's increasingly true across the 50 states, I might say. It's increasingly true across the 50 states.
I unquestionably have heard it. What concerns me, essentially, is that we will remove our competitive spur and find that we have in fact created a type of economy which is extremely sluggish. And if our long-term problems are so crucial to the resolution of the type of issues we have been discussing today, one of the things that I look forward to as being a major contributor to a solution to these problems is the maintenance of competitive pressures on American industry. And I should
but you can't shrink yourself into success. I mean, you know, you've really got to, I think you've got to rethink this issue, because I think you're now part of the problem in that area. If you could show me some trend lines, significant trend lines that were showing that we were building important new industries, high-value industries, shoring up important